Hi, Dan.
Hey, Vanessa. How are you?
Good. I'm trying to keep up. How are you?
It's same, always. I know we're going to talk this week about OpenClaw,
Otherwise known as Moltbot, otherwise known as Claudebot.
right? And I will tell you that and I'm at the point of just going out and buying a MacBook, a Mac Mini. And then and this is a good way to start the conversation. And then I stopped myself.
Why did you stop yourself?
Well, that's the nature of the conversation. Well, first of all, I know too much and I know too little. So I know too little because I'm not sure, which is probably the big part of our conversation, that it's all things that they say it is. And I don't want to go out on a whim and buy a $600 machine, which is not so much, but it's still $600. There's other parts to that story, but that's the first part. That's the first part.
Yeah. I want to start out the conversation to just say this is not going to be um, a dialogue around how you can make millions with OpenClaw or how you even set up or the mechanics behind OpenClaw. I think you and I are showing up today to maybe normalize that it's okay that you are not yet on the OpenClaw train. And you and I have our reasons, which we'll go into, but safe to say, I have been bombarded by the general feed, but also people that we know, very smart people, I might add, who are doing amazing things with OpenClaw. And it isn't to say that we want to downplay this technology, but we also want to talk about maybe why you may not want to participate yet, or where you need to be to even consider being part of it. Because this technology, let's face it, is awe-inspiring, but it is also so new that I think it requires enough of a learning curve that you need to know what you don't know before jumping full on in, because I think it's still early. I know many other people would disagree, but yes, let's normalize not yet being part of the OpenClaw fan club. I am an admirer. I am in the wings. I will probably still be an early adopter compared to everybody else, but I'm not yet fully operational on it, and I have my reasons why. And Dan, I want to know your reasons why.
Yeah, and I will say this with all honesty that next week you might hear that I actually flipped the script and I changed my mind because
We always reserve the right to change our minds on this
yes,
show.
and forget the fact that I shaved everybody and cut myself shaving, so it's not
You're not making out with a
as
Sharpie.
you had said earlier, it's not like I'm not sniffing Sharpies. But yeah, here's the thing about OpenClaw that I think most people, not just you and I, because I think you and I maybe fall into a more like little cutting edge, top of the curve type of thing. But I think that most people that are getting the hype and seeing the hype is they've not yet necessarily embraced AI to a full degree. And so then they're jumping into this thing. And it's a lot of promise, but it's not really clear what you get. And so it's as if somebody said, swallow this pill and you'll be able to fly. It's only $600. And you think, well, now I'm going to take the chance to fly. You could jump off the side of the building and actually realize that you spend $600 and you're off the side of the building. I'm not yet sure that it does all the things that it says it does. We've gotten a lot of representation that does, but it's not like real experience. It's not like shared experience. Like, as in, there's not a core bunch of people that have a shared experience that has actually been validated. And I think for all the people that are not like really robust into AI, I think it's a big jump. I think there's so many things that you could do in AI that are actually more purposeful and anchored, and that people like you and I could actually say, like, do this, and you'll get like, we can create guaranteed results. And I don't think that there's nothing guaranteed.
Yeah, I mean, that's safe to say that if you are considering an entry point into AI, more likely than not, OpenClaw should not be the point where you dive in. But we should probably clarify what OpenClaw is, because people have probably been hearing Claudebot, Moltbot, OpenClaw, and don't really know what it is, right? So maybe we should clarify that first, because a lot of hype, maybe not a lot of true understanding. So
Yeah.
I'll give you my definition and then you can give me
Okay.
yours.
Yeah.
But basically, OpenClaw runs as an agent. It's this idea of a personal agent, and created basically over a very short period of time late last year by a retired developer, Peter Steinberger, in Europe. He had just exited. He was thinking about life, the meaning of life, where he's going to go next, and he decided, I'm going to use Codex to build this personal agent that, quote, my mom could use. Easy enough that my mother could use. And thus, Claudebot, Maltbot, OpenClaw came to be. And it's something called open source. So it still exists on a GitHub repo, which is essentially like a public Google Drive where you store all of your code and all of the README files to make this thing go. And it's essentially gone viral on GitHub. It's gone viral in our feeds. And it's supposed to be the one agent that has done what AI has promised to do, which is to do things for you on your behalf. And people are doing incredibly cool things. But to your point, it's still early enough that we're not quite sure where it lands on the good and bad scale or safe to risky scale. But people are using it to do everything. The mundane death by 1,000 paper cuts sort of, logistical things to building out whole content. There's so many use cases, but the use cases also are not quite clear. You and I, Dan, know some incredibly smart people who are already doing incredible things with OpenClaw. But I, for some reason, am still hesitating on using it. And my primary reason, straight up, is lack of time. There is so much on my plate as an AI consultant, as an AI practitioner, in terms of building up also my business and my audience, that yes, OpenClaw could probably help me out with if I took the time to do. But right now, if I do a cost-benefit analysis very quickly on the back of the napkin, it's not worth it yet to me. Which isn't to say it won't be, but that lack of time and that trade-off for me right now, I feel like my time's better invested going deeper into something like Claude Code.
Totally agree. Before I give you my opinion about it, I'll tell you what it is. So yes, it is open source. It's not just a singular agent. So for example, most people, just for clarification for people who are listening, most people are used to ChatGPT or Claude, and they have an agent, there's a box, you ask it to do something, depending on the prompt, it does something. That's what you could say is the agent model. You ask it to do a thing. The thing that's bigger about this, which is what AGI is supposed to be, is a current state orchestration layer, meaning it's an orchestration agent that will then spawn off separate agents that will do stuff. So if you had, and that's pretty hard to do on a technical level elsewhere in the stuff that we build, to have a truly intelligent orchestration agent that says, I'm going to create a social media agent, and I'm going to create a banking agent, and I'm going to create a law agent, and I'm going to do all these things. So it does that out of the box. That's what Peter created. It does it in a way, it's probably not that sophisticated, and there's not a lot of rules around it as far as I understand, but it does do those things. And the reason it's able to do that well, and that's why so many people are running out and buying Mac Minis, is because it runs on your machine. It's a closed environment. I don't want to get too much into opinion about there's some problems, but you should run it, just as anybody's listening right now, is that if you're going to run it on a walled off environment. Don't give it all the keys to your other computer or your email, because theoretically, because it's an agent that can spawn new agents, it could decide to attack your bank account and spend all your money. And I think that's really one of the reasons actually hidden in Vanessa's and my thinking is we know that there's actually holes in the way it works. It could do amazing things, but it also could do amazingly bad things. It's not yet clear what those boundaries are. My opinion about it, though, is have you ever, I lived in New York City for a while, and I've traveled, have you ever been to a place where there's a restaurant, a hot restaurant, and you get in line, and the line is a block long? And then you talk to everybody and they're like, oh my God, it's the hottest restaurant. Oh my God, that's the hottest restaurant.
I live in San Francisco where everyone queues up for everything.
Queues up.
So yes.
And then you're 20 feet from you've waited for an hour and you're 20 feet away and you realize they're serving fish cakes and you hate fish. But you got in line because you heard it's awesome. You're not exactly sure what it does, but you've heard it's awesome. And I think we're right now at the point where we've heard it's awesome. There's not enough evidence of what it does. There is, if you look just a little deep, you can hear that it's awesome, that it can actually empty your bank account. So there's awesomely bad, and there's awesomely we're not exactly sure. And there's also what you spoke about, which is that to set it up and to manage it, probably takes quite a bit of time. And so I think that it's kind of like like nitroglycerin. It's kind of like a rocket fuel that maybe reshapes where we're going, like Claude Code has. It maybe reshapes it, but it's not exactly sure if it's awesomely good or awesomely bad yet. And so I would say, at least for this week, I'm gonna wait on it till
Totally
I learn
fair.
more.
Weeks in weeks in AI are essentially years,
Yeah.
so that's totally
Yeah.
fair. No, and I think you and I agree is that there are definitely use cases that we have seen, and we have ideas in terms of how we would like to implement OpenClaw, and OpenClaw is probably a shape of things to come. That is very real. So much so that Sam Altman poached Peter Steinberger, and he is now part of the OpenAI team, undoubtedly to like influence the product roadmap around ChatGPT. OpenAI is probably going to lean into personal agents or more approachable agents, because that's the cool part of OpenClaw is it's doing what AI promised us it could do, which is do stuff on our behalf, but doing it in a way that is easily accessible. It doesn't require a command line interface or the terminal. Right. You don't need to learn like a new interface, or especially for folks from non-technical branches of work historically, the folks are hella intimidated by the terminal. And they're like, I don't want to do this with Claude Code. Like that's been sort of a barrier to entry. And now you present something like OpenClaw, which could potentially, you talk to it through Slack, WhatsApp, Telegraph, text, and it goes and does stuff on your behalf. Like that is the promising part and the cool part. And I think hopefully will shape, right, the future
Right.
of how we interact with this technology. But with that, especially right now, comes so much vulnerability. And that vulnerability factor and trade-off for me is what's kind of keeping me from prioritizing it more on top of like this long list of things that I and you and many other people are trying to manage and keep up with, right, on the AI side. You know, you and I encounter this in our work, but there are things such as, that are called prompt injections, right? That are vulnerabilities where if you are working with an agent, it encounters like a bad actor, in terms of like another interface or another bit of software where, yeah, all of your API keys are going to be exposed. And for those of you who don't know, like you hear this like API keys, that doesn't sound so bad. But then when you run up, as someone has, tens of thousands of dollars worth of compute charge from using your API or running up sort of other financial implications, it exposes something else other than sort of this vulnerability, on the cybersecurity side. It's a vulnerability in terms of how we work with AI, right?
Right.
And OpenClaw, because we can tell it what to do, but what we don't understand is, are we also telling it what not to do, right? These agents are incredibly capable. And so when we say, go find the best business class flights, right, from the West Coast US to London, it will go and do that. But what we don't necessarily account for when we give it this quote unquote prompt, right, or we give it this task is what we don't want it to do, right? In terms of, you know, it cannot have like a layover, in some far off way. When people talk about prompt engineering, we're very clear around sort of like what the constraints are and, where the possibilities are. But when we have this promise of like, hey, OpenClaw can do all this stuff for you, and we just give it sort of basic commands through Telegraph rather than giving it like this huge sort of like user message and prompt, that's where I feel like we get a little bit lazy. I mean, we're already lazy with our communication anyway. Let's face it. That's why prompting is still such a skill, because how we communicate is still a problem where sure I could learn and have Claude Code help me kind of build in sort of, these security guardrails. But am I ready to understand like how I sandbox something like OpenClaw so that it doesn't shoot me in the foot later? I mean, that's on me, and I want to be aware of that, and I want my clients or whoever else I'm working with to be aware of it. The other thing I'm not so certain on is, I guess, the enterprise safety and use for it, right? We work a lot with businesses and companies. I think personal agentic AI, this is huge. And then like how this translates. I had someone say like, can I use this for my team? And I said, hard stop, hell no, please. Like, don't, they were seriously considering it because they were exploring like AI, right? Implementation and strategy.
Right.
Those to me, that's kind of like how the dominoes sort of fall for me in terms of why I need to stop. It's also compelling me to understand it more and also be prepared for, this future because it's going to be kind of OpenClaw shaped. I also have a bad taste in my mouth in some ways that Steinberger is now joining OpenAI, and
Yes,
OpenAI doesn't
exactly.
own OpenClaw, but it's subsidizing, right, OpenClaw, because OpenClaw is now also run by numerous contributors, right, who are managing the repo and, making sure that it involves. They've added security guardrails, like it's evolving thing, and that's really commendable. But the fact that, Steinberger was really being jockeyed by both Zuckerberg and Altman and ended up going with Altman, which makes sense from like an AI kind of product perspective. But man, I don't know what I think about OpenAI and ChatGPT like getting better with that sort of personal agent AI and people like offloading to that. I don't know. Am I being precious? Am I being a snob?
No, no, so here's the thing, I think there's 2 I mean, I think there's us and people like us that are listening that are into the AI and they know what it means to, like, not want to necessarily work for OpenAI, right? And because that means something. I think for most other people, they don't. To that point, I think the thing is that for people that are, somewhat been around OpenAI for AI for a while, there's this sentiment that, they started out as a foundation, they were supposed to be for public good, and now they're all about profit. The open source movement, and whether or not you believe that or not, like when people think about the open source movement, which is what Peter started building this thing out, it's about sharing something with community. If you were switching over to a very profit motivated company, will the platform still be the same? Right? It's just like working, it's like saying, well, we're PBS and we're always about truth, but now we're being run by the Epstein administration. Well, I don't necessarily know if it's going to be the same thing.
I
Right.
love that framing. That makes so much sense. It makes me feel even better about my stance.
Right. Like it's just, you just don't know. And you're like, well, so there's that. And then I think, but for everybody else that doesn't know, I think the thing, like back to the point what you were saying before, and I think this is important. I still, when I'm working with people that are looking to do like real business outcomes, and I say business outcomes, I mean real outcomes. My mom, the people that I serve are like, they specifically want, well, will it do this thing? So I'll give you an example. Let's say that I had a cold, I'm getting over it. And I said, let's say that I would like, well, I really want to know which herbal tea would work and what this used by doctor. I want you to go out and do the research and give me the definitive answer and then keep it private and then tell me with certainty, like this one, that I know OpenClaw can do the web scrapes and do that stuff. It doesn't have any discernment. It has the capacity to actually go and do these different things. It doesn't have discernment. And I don't necessarily know that we're at a place yet where these orchestration layer agents have discernment. And so if you're going to trust an orchestration agent to do something and pay for it and whatever, you're going to want to know that you actually trust it. And if you can't trust it with your bank account, you might not want to trust it with other personal things, right? And it's this equivalent of standing on the line and being said, go to this restaurant, and then you wait for an hour and you go, oh, it's fish cakes. I hate fish cakes.
Fair. And this is one of the places where I really wonder about the promises of OpenClaw, because if it really does have perpetual memory, persistent memory, excuse me, where it remembers things about you, your preferences, and your conversations, and then that kind of builds into the context awareness, right, of what the agent has. Makes it more useful. Long story short, context awareness, persistent memory, it just makes it more useful because it understands, right, the situation because it quote unquote remembered. And it supposedly is programmed in a way, Steinberger programmed it in a way where it can learn from itself, like it can teach. And
Right.
so I wonder with OpenClaw, with like enough uses and iterations, like not even just at an individual level, but like eventually, can it get that discernment, from you like using it consistently? I mean, then that's sort of like forking off into another conversation. But that's what makes it so promising, right? Something like OpenClaw in terms of these promises. But I haven't seen, I've heard plenty of things of where it sent an email, it booked tickets, it helped me with my content pipeline, it helped me do this, it helped me send messages, which are all very useful and important. But I don't know if I see that persistent memory and or that learning at play to make me again, another reason why I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't know if it's, like, quite yet, like, worth my time. And but to be fair, I'm also the person that never buys, like, the new model of the iPhone when it comes out. I
Yeah,
always
yeah.
wait, like, a year later, right?
I will say that probably maybe I'll speak for myself, but I bet because we tend to be like bleeding edge peeps, right? That if we found that it actually had a very, like, bona fide service that was, like, where we could actually point to a friend that's like, "No, I actually got this outcome, and it helped me do X and Y in a very specific, measurable way, quantifiable way," we'd probably be sold more on it and be able to, like, make the investment and then prove it out to other people. I'm just not there. Like, I've literally seen dozens and hundreds of posts where people are like, "Well, you know, it helped me come up with 100 pieces of content for my website." And I'm like, "I can do that now with ChatGPT. I don't d I well, I don't know if I need." "Yeah, but it did it on its own." "Okay, well, I can build a Claude code tool that does that also." "Yeah, but it, like, helped find." Somebody saw a post the other day where somebody said that they were trying to go out with their girlfriend for Valentine's Day, and they didn't book a restaurant, and how restaurants are always busy, so then it did a Google search and found 5 restaurants that are nearby and made a recommendation, and I'm like, "Yeah, and you still have to call the 5 restaurants, and then do you even wanna go?"
But some OpenClaws even got a voice agent and called, like, restaurants and places on some users' behalf, supposedly, like, I've seen 1 or
Okay,
2
so let me
uses.
ask you, and I purposely
Yeah.
preloaded this. If your husband took you out to a restaurant on Valentine's Day, and let's say that he didn't book it, and then he just didn't, and then he was like, "Well, I'm gonna rely on my Claude code." And then you show up at this restaurant that he was able to pull out of his hat at the last minute, you show up, and it is the worst experience ever, right? And you say, you know, "What's up? Why are we here? This is terrible." And he blamed it on I'm sorry, on OpenClaw.
Don't blame anything on Claude Code, Dan.
Yeah, exactly. Like, would that stand as a brand? You might wanna toss that thing at that point, right? Like, I get it, I just am not yet convinced based on the stories of what's been done, of the discernment. I've heard it, like, generates a lot of volume.
No, exactly, and that's why you and I know, like, we've built agents and agentic workflows where we have to be very precise, right, with the user message or the system
Yeah,
instructions to kinda deliver that because, to be fair, again, if we have the context of this task, it's supposed to take out menial tasks, then the assumption is we are gonna give menial prompts, essentially, which is, "Find me a reservation that's available. I'm in trouble, like, I need to, book this dinner." But you don't say, "What are your dietary restrictions and/or preferences?" Like,
right.
"What's your price limitation? What's the rating of the restaurant?" Like, I think you and I would, but would most people? Probably not. Now, on the other hand, if OpenClaw has that persistent memory to say, like, "I know Dan likes, you know, Italian food. And maybe I remember something about his wife, like, not liking a certain type of food, right? If that were pulling it together and consistently, I would be like, amazing. That sounds great. Like, let's do it. But again, I haven't seen that use case yet, and I don't want to be the guinea pig, right, for that.
You just literally said it. If you were able to make it more human, which would be coming from engineering and prompting and whatever, and
This
that.
high dimensional thinking, right,
Right,
that
like,
goes
even that
in.
dimensional thing, it's not just memory, it's like literally it remembers things, and let's say, for example, when you go to a fancy restaurant for your birthday or for Valentine's Day or something like that, and you're taking somebody else, I bet you do what most humans do, which is you ask friends about it. So you look at you look at reviews, you hear about restaurants, you put them in your memory, maybe OpenClaw keeps a store of the things that you've said, "Oh, I wanna go to this restaurant," and scrapes the things, and you go, "Yeah, that's within my budget, and I do like that type of food," and so it remembers your things. But I bet you also know the context of what your husband wants to do, knows, like, his food allergies, knows he doesn't like fish cakes or whatever, right? Like, knows all those things that maybe are not in your database, and also, you go and you ask friends and you say, "Well, if they say, 'No, well, it was really expensive,'" and you're like, wasn't really the portions were really small." So if it was at that point like human, where it was like it literally proactively knew all those things about you and went out and sent a message to your friends and said, "Hey, it's Fee. Did you go to this place?" And they SMS. And they said, yeah, it's not good, pass. And that went back recursively into the system and it crossed that out and said, oh, yeah, that'd be great. Then that would be the case. That would be, and literally, I don't think that it does that just yet. If it does do that through engineering, like that's an app, that's a service, like that's a, then you and I'd be like, yeah, I need to have that because I went on the best vacation, I went on the best bike ride, I went to the best restaurant. It knew when I should pick up my dry cleaning. You'd be like, yeah, that's kind of
Because that is
okay.
helpful, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, 100% that is
yeah,
helpful. And again, I reserve the right to change my mind. Like that, it can show that, you and I encounter people who consistently, right, have experienced that with OpenClaw. Fantastic. But again, like for me, the calculus behind, is it worth kind of setting up and learning and going through the growing pains right now on top of everything else that I need to do? I think it's manageable. Also, I don't know what my friends would think if, I texted them, or at least they didn't know that it was an AI agent texting them. We have a mutual connection, Aria Permezi, who runs in our circles, who I just want to give a shout out to because I appreciate what he's done with his OpenClaw instance. But this idea is that his agent actually does all the things that, OpenClaw promises to do, even posting on LinkedIn, but the agent always pronounces himself, right?
right.
This is, Arya's agent named himself Ren. And it's been really interesting to see. I want to give shout outs to this, where this is like an incredible use of OpenClaw to kind of engage in dialogue, but also like present. Like there's nothing shady about it, where it's like,
Right,
hey, this isn't Arya. This is
right.
Arya's agent. And the agent is actually interacting in discourse in pretty cool ways, right? You and I are marketing people. We are human interaction people. And I have to give props to that, where it's like when I see that use case of OpenClaw, that makes me say, okay, OpenClaw is going to stay hot, right, on my priority list. Because if someone, Aria has set it up this way, that's something that I would eventually like to do. Whereas most of the use cases that I'm seeing, not I'm not really impressed. But I also enjoy like shopping online. Like I like looking for things online. Like that's my
Yeah,
joy, right?
yeah.
And so, it's again like making room for like all things. It's not a good, bad, yes, no, but that like when I see those sorts of use cases, it gives the whole thing credence in terms of like, okay, this is the direction I would use. But I'm also aware of how brilliant Aria is, right?
Exactly, like,
That,
he
he can set it
engineered
up
that.
this way
Right.
relatively safely. I know he says like, he's good with risk, right? And that's everyone's sort of decision. But again, that's sort of like aspirational. Once I get to this sort of like, my own skill set kind of leveling up with Arias, or the barrier to entry is much lower, that I don't need to be super user like Aria to use it. Like that to me, like that's my own calculus. And that's the reason why I'm still quote unquote abstaining, right?
Yeah, no, I totally get it, and I think the thing is that for the things that are gonna work and that are, let's say, Ari is, like, just scratching the surface, I mean, he's a really smart person, and he's probably engineered it, it's not out of the box, and I would say the hope is that for, OpenAI and Peter Steinbrenner is that they do some of that. I mean, because obviously he's a very bright guy, but they do some of that, like, human engineering of the experience of what it could do. Because I know I've read that in his comment about why he went with OpenAI's offer versus Meta's offer is, again, his mission is to make it so that his something his mom can use, and he doesn't really think it's something his mom can use yet. But I don't even think that's just about ease. I think that with the money that they can put behind it, my hope is that they put actually really smart people behind it, and they think about, like, really, well, what would people want that's really useful? Not just that it generates text, but, like, that it literally books your mom, like, an assisted living nurse for certain hours when you can't go and pick her up, or it, like, finds out about your food allergies and only gives you recommendations of things proactively, or it helps you find that restaurant for Valentine's Day that you booked late and that you don't look like a fool because it doesn't embarrass you, or it, like, all those things, right? And I think that with the power of that organization and, like, the people that work there, they probably could do it, but I don't think out of the box it's there yet. You know, I c talk to me next week, right? Like, I'll probably be, like,
Stay
toying with the
tuned, folks. Well,
yeah.
I think each episode from here on in needs to have, like, an OpenClaw status update.
Exactly!
Haven't you?
Well, listen, if I had OpenClaw right now, I'd probably have a 3rd screen where it'd be showing you. I mean, that is really what we're seeing. You'd have, like, we'd have a 3rd screen where my OpenClaw would have a name, and it would be talking, did and the fact is, I bet also that you and I don't actually most people don't actually wanna see a bunch of text. Like, I think it's, like, one thing if it, like, you know.
No, I mean, we're just trying to give, like, a TLDR on things that people may
Yeah.
be coming
Yeah.
across. No, I mean, it's I'm very curious. I'm also really curious, I know, with Steinberger going to OpenAI, I wonder how the Claude team is feeling about it because I know,
Yeah.
Claude legal ga or sorry, Anthropic's legal gave him a cease and desist around essentially, like, using the name. And it's interesting that, they took that path, which makes sense. I mean, Anthropic is mostly sort of like enterprise based, right? Working with businesses and teams that personal agents may not be a thing, but man, that could have been interesting to have someone like Steinberger kind of help their personal product pipeline, but maybe that wasn't a priority.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see. It'll be really interesting to see. I think that from a strategy perspective, OpenAI is so big at this point, and they're bigger than Anthropic. I see 2 venues, and I imagine that Sam Altman and the powers that be probably see it this way too. I see that there's like core AI LLMs that they are doing, and then I see like consumer products, like competing with Apple. And I think that this checks the box of consumer products.
Especially going with the hardware, right? There's still that
Yeah.
collab with Johnny Ives that's still
Yeah.
TBD.
Yeah, I think that this could be like either a subscription or a physical box that you basically buy because it does the monotonous things, but it does it so well. It's such a and it's not so it's not an LLM. It's essentially it's a service layer, right? So like the thing that books the restaurants and stuff and the thing that takes care of makes sure that your brakes are, whatever, takes your books your self-driving car to get replace its brakes or whatever. That would be a really cool future, and I don't think Anthropic is looking at anything like that. So,
Probably not. Yeah.
so that's cool. Hey, listen, Sam, if you're that's a job I would love to have. I'd love to be like the architect that helps figure out product for that.
Hey, I'd be curious what the next gen of Alexa and Siri and all of those home, devices look like. Because right now they're pretty remedial.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Alright. I see where this is going. I see where this
Yeah,
is going, but we could go on forever, so I'm gonna stop
we
us there.
could.
I think people
We
have
should
had
do a thing
enough.
on that. That's actually there's an idea there. We'll talk when we get off the call.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll brainstorm some more, but Dan, it's always a pleasure catching up. Thanks for being on the Open Claw sidelines with me.
Until next time, maybe we, like, buy a box and we build something together.
That would be interesting. That would be interesting, and if folks are interested in seeing that, maybe they can let us know in the
Yeah, I
comments
think we can do
too.
that.
Or if they see other resources and tutorials that they have tried and that they vet that they like, we're always up for crowdsourcing, so, yeah, definitely share it with us in the comments.
Alright, it was good seeing you.
Good to see you. Talk to you next time.
Okay, bye.